The knock on my door came just after noon, sharp and confident, the kind that doesn't wait to be invited. When I opened it, my son stood there holding a bouquet wrapped in shiny paper, smiling like a man already thinking about his next appointment. Behind him stood his wife. Clara looked exactly the way she always did, polished, composed, expensive. Her perfume slipped into my house before she did, overpowering the scent of the soup I had been warming on the stove. She scanned the room quickly, her eyes passing over the worn sofa, the faded curtains, the old heater humming louder than it should. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," my son said, stepping inside and placing the flowers on the table. We sat down, and for a few minutes, things felt normal. Safe. Almost warm. Then he spoke again, casually, as if he were asking about the weather. "Mom, Clara's still sending you the $5,000 every month, right? I just want to make sure you're comfortable." The words hit me so hard I forgot how to breathe. $5,000. For the past 8 months, I had stretched meals, skipped buying fresh food, and thanked God every time the church dropped off a food box. I had learned how to make one bag of groceries last 2 weeks. I folded my hands in my lap and chose my words carefully. "I'm managing," I said quietly. "The church helps me get by." The room shifted. My son's smile faded, confusion creeping into his eyes. He turned slightly toward his wife, but before he could speak, Clara laughed softly. "Oh, Mother," she said sweetly, placing her hand on his arm, "you must be forgetting again. I bring it to you myself every month." I looked at her face. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. "If you've been bringing it," I said calmly, "then it's never reached me." Silence wrapped around us. My son frowned. "Clara, I transfer the money to you every month. Same amount. Same date." She nodded smoothly. "Of course you do. Maybe the bank's delayed. Or maybe," she tilted her head slightly toward me, her smile softening. "Memory isn't what it used to be at this age." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply nodded and stood up to clear the table. Some truths don't need defending. They need time. After they left, the house felt heavier than before. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the flowers that now felt like decoration for a lie. I counted the months in my head. 8 months. 8 payments. $40,000. That money could have fixed my roof, replaced my broken heater, allowed me to live without asking for help. Instead, I had lived quietly, gratefully, and small. That night, I opened my old notebook. It used to hold grocery lists and prayers. This time, I wrote something different. Find the truth. The next morning, I went to the bank. I sat across from a young teller, who typed carefully, and then shook her head. "No deposits like that. Not now. Not before. No mistakes. No delays. Nothing." I didn't cry. I started writing everything down: dates, times, visits, the exact words Clara used, the gifts she brought, the excuses she repeated. Weeks passed, and she kept coming. Always smiling. Always generous with flowers and sweets. Never with money. One afternoon, she arrived driving a brand new luxury car, the sunlight reflecting off it like a mirror. I noticed how quickly she changed the subject when I mentioned it. That night, I stopped wondering if I was wrong. I knew something was being hidden from me. I still hadn't confronted her. I was waiting. Because the moment a liar feels safest is the exact moment their story begins to fall apart. I didn't call my son that night. I didn't confront Clara. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. Instead, I waited 2 days. On the third morning, I put on my coat and walked down the street to the old public phone booth near the grocery store. I didn't want to use my home phone. I didn't want any trace of hesitation in my voice. I needed to sound like a woman asking a harmless question. I dialed my son's office. When the receptionist answered, I introduced myself politely. "I'm just calling to confirm a financial matter," I said. "My son mentioned he's been sending me a monthly transfer." There was a pause. Papers shuffled. Keys clicked. "Yes," the accountant said slowly, "the transfers are going out regularly." My heart beat faster. "Then perhaps you can help me understand something. I haven't received any of it." Another pause, longer this time. "That's strange," she said. "Because the money is being deposited successfully." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Deposited where?" Silence. "Then, carefully," she said, "into an account under your name." The world seemed to tilt. "I only have one account," I said. "And it's empty." The accountant inhaled sharply. "There is a second account." "A second account. Same name. Same identity. Different hands." I thanked her and hung up before my voice could betray me. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the dusty glass of the phone booth. An old woman stared back, lined face, tired eyes, steady expression. I didn't look like someone who had just been robbed of $40,000. I looked like someone who had finally been told the truth. That afternoon, I called an old friend, Daniel. He used to handle corporate accounts before retirement, and he still believed numbers told stories people tried to hide. When he arrived, I spread the bank statements across my kitchen table. He didn't speak at first. Then he looked up slowly. This wasn't an accident. He pointed to signatures, account openings, routing numbers. Everything was clean. Intentional. Calculated. "She opened the account using your name," he said. "And your son's authorization." I closed my eyes. My son trusted easily. He signed what was placed in front of him. Clara knew that. "There's more," Daniel added quietly. "She's been using a secondary company card. Travel expenses. High-end purchases. A down payment on a vehicle. The new car." Suddenly, it all fit together. I felt something unexpected rise in me, not anger, not grief, but clarity. For months, I had questioned my memory, my awareness, my worth. Now I understood that none of it had been failing. Someone else had been stealing. That night, I locked every document in a metal box under my bed. I slept better than I had in months. The next week, Clara visited again. She brought pastries and smiled warmly. She spoke about her plans, her stress, her generosity. She handed me flowers and asked if I was feeling better lately. I watched her carefully. Liars, I realized, don't fear questions. They fear timing. A few days later, I invited them both to dinner. "Nothing special," I said. "Just family." Clara agreed instantly. My son sounded relieved. That evening, I cooked slowly. Carefully. I set the table the way I used to when my husband was alive, candles, proper plates, no rush. Clara arrived relaxed, confident, certain she was untouchable. During dinner, I waited. Then, casually, I said, "I'm glad the last transfer came through. I finally managed to get the heater repaired." Her fork froze midair. Just for a second. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly. Of course. I send it every month on the 10th. My son looked up. The 10th? No, I scheduled it for the 15th. The air turned heavy. Clara laughed, but it came too fast. Right, yes, the 15th. I smiled gently. Then I'll check the bank on the 15th. She didn't touch her dessert. That night, Clara thought the danger had passed. She didn't know she'd just made her first mistake, and I was finally ready to stop waiting. After that dinner, Clara stopped visiting for a while. Not completely, just enough to look normal. A quick phone call. A short message. A polite excuse about work or travel. Silence, used carefully, can be as manipulative as words. My son, however, grew quieter. He didn't mention the money again, but I noticed how often he checked his phone when he visited, how distracted he seemed, how his laughter no longer came easily. Guilt has a way of working its way to the surface, even when the truth hasn't fully arrived yet. I didn't push him. I didn't need to. Instead, I prepared. I met with a lawyer I trusted, someone who listened without interrupting and asked questions that cut straight through emotion and into facts. I placed the documents on his desk, bank statements, account openings, transaction histories. He didn't look surprised. This is clear, he said. But timing matters. Timing. That word followed me home. Clara returned 2 weeks later, cheerful as ever. She hugged me tightly, asked about my health, and spoke loudly about how much she worried about me. The performance was flawless. I've been so busy, she said. But I always think of you. I nodded, watching her carefully. That evening, I called my son. Come by tomorrow, I said gently. There's something I want to discuss. Just the two of us. He hesitated, but agreed. The next afternoon, he sat across from me at the same kitchen table where I had once counted pennies for groceries. I poured him tea and waited until he looked up. Do you remember when your father used to say that silence is louder than shouting? I asked. He nodded slowly. I didn't want to embarrass anyone, I continued. And I didn't want to accuse without proof. His shoulders tensed. So I checked, I said. Quietly. I slid the folder across the table. At first, he flipped through the pages without understanding. Then I saw the moment it hit him, the slight widening of his eyes, the pause in his hands, the slow tightening of his jaw. This can't be right, he whispered. It is, I said gently. He shook his head. Clara wouldn't, she wouldn't do this. She did, I replied. And I need you to see it clearly. He turned pages faster now. Account numbers. Amounts. Dates. Then his voice broke. I signed these. Yes, I said. Without reading. He leaned back, covering his face with his hands. I didn't touch him. This was a pain he needed to feel fully. I trusted her, he said hoarsely. I know, I replied. That's why this hurts. He stayed like that for a long time. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, steady, quiet, dangerous in its calm. What do we do? I met his eyes. We let the truth speak for itself. That evening, we invited Clara to what she believed was a church charity meeting, a small gathering to discuss donations and planning. She loved those events. They made her feel important. Untouchable. The hall was quiet when we arrived. In the center of the table sat a thick, sealed envelope. Clara noticed it immediately. What's that? She asked lightly. Just paperwork, I said. She laughed. You and your papers. When my son opened the envelope, the room changed. He pulled out the documents slowly, one by one. Bank statements. Receipts. Account registrations. Clara's smile faded. What is this? She demanded. Explain, my son said calmly. She laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. He slid the papers toward her. Explain. Her excuses came fast now: confusion, misunderstandings, stress, intentions. Then tears. Loud ones. I watched silently. Finally, she looked at me. You knew? Yes, I said. She turned to my son. You're choosing her over me. He stood up slowly. I'm choosing the truth. The room fell silent. Clara thought the worst was over. She didn't realize the envelope wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of what she was about to lose. Clara didn't come home with my son that night. He returned alone, long after midnight, his shoulders heavy, his face older than it had been the day before. He didn't speak at first. He sat at my kitchen table and stared at the same spot where I had once counted grocery money and pretended everything was fine. I asked her to leave, he said finally. I nodded. I had expected nothing else. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. Clara didn't disappear quietly. She called. She messaged. She sent long explanations filled with apologies that somehow blamed everyone except herself. Stress, confusion, misunderstandings. Love twisted into excuses. My son read every message. He didn't reply to a single one. A week later, the lawyer took action. The second account was frozen. Transactions were flagged. The company initiated an internal review that moved faster than Clara ever expected. Money leaves a trail, and lies leave fingerprints. When authorities contacted her, she tried one last performance. Tears. Shock. Claims of innocence. The documents didn't care. Neither did the numbers. The money was recovered slowly, not all at once, not easily, but enough to restore what had been stolen. More important than the money was what returned with it: truth, dignity, and something I hadn't felt in a long time: control over my own life. My son insisted on handling everything himself. Court dates. Meetings. Consequences. I should have protected you, he said one evening. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You did. Eventually. And that matters. Clara never apologized directly to me. Not once. She sent one final message, addressed to both of us, filled with regret that somehow still sounded like resentment. Then she vanished from our lives, taking her perfume, her lies, and her certainty with her. The house felt different after that. Quieter. Lighter. I fixed the heater. Repaired the roof. Bought fresh food without checking prices twice. Simple things that felt like freedom. But what changed most wasn't my living situation. It was how I saw myself. For months, I had doubted my memory. My judgment. My worth. I had accepted struggle quietly because I thought it was my fault. Age has a way of convincing people they should be grateful for less. I was no longer grateful for lies. One afternoon, my son asked me something unexpected. Why didn't you confront her right away? He asked. Why wait? I smiled. Because if I had accused her without proof, she would have turned you against me, I said gently. And I didn't want you choosing between us. I wanted you choosing the truth. He nodded slowly. That night, after he left, I sat alone in my living room. The same room Clara once scanned with judgment. The same table where she lied without blinking. I felt no anger. Only relief. People think strength fades with age. That patience is weakness. That silence means surrender. They are wrong. Patience is power when you know how to use it. Silence is dangerous when someone mistakes it for ignorance. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse recklessly. I didn't fight emotionally. I waited. And waiting changed everything. They thought my age made me vulnerable. They never realized it had made me unstoppable.